All right, so today we're talking about sales. And before we dive into this, I want to point out that your sales strategy we always start every one of these off with the how this relates to the business model and getting funding, right? The five C's of credit. This does kind of go into capacity where you're trying to prove that you can make the sales that you put on your pro forma. But I wouldn't say this one actually falls into this is probably the one nuanced chapter that may or may not be included. But going back to our conversation last week about surveying and understanding who your customer is, that's exactly the reason that I presented this in my book, because I had so many people that wanted help with sales. And even Clayton did a survey, and the number one reason or the number one thing that NIA wanted help with was sales. We had to put it in the middle because everything that we've talked about leads up to sales. You can't just jump into it and go. It has to, you have to have your strategy intact so you know who you want to reach. You have to have your branding intact because I'll talk about where that factors into your sales pitch. And then you have to have your marketing intact because it draws people in and helps them understand why you are reaching out for your sale. The other thing I want to point out is I started in sales in 2010. And I still remember the very first day that I showed up to our first sales boot camp. And I was so nervous that I sweat through my jacket, my shirt, and everything else to the point where Jenna Burns, who is now the vice president for the Oklahoma City Dodgers or baseball club or whatever their name is now,
Comments.
actually comments. Yes, I knew they changed it.
Keep my
She
promise.
actually walked up to me and said, "Do you need to go home?" And I was so determined to work for the Rough Riders that I had to take a step back, get my shit under control, and I came back the very next year. I won Salesman of the Year.
Mm.
So, and it wasn't. I do tend to be a little bit introverted, and I'm not. We were just talking about the Grant Cardones of the world. That every sales guru out there is very dependent on you having the same personality as they do. Grant Cardone's way over the top. And if I tried to have that sales approach, it would be very inauthentic. I can't do it. I don't want to do it. I don't really like being pitched that way. So
Right.
I can't really buy into it. So what I had to do was create a process. And that's what really helped because my brain works in processes, right? So I had to sit down and document it this way to overcome a lot of the anxiety I had when pitching. So if you are somebody who's introverted, or if you are somebody who thinks sales is a gimmicky thing, that it's not something you have to do, this one is actually for you because I break it down in a way that I think a lot of introverts can utilize the information and overcome their weakness, I guess, if you want to break it down by the SWOT analysis or SWOT ideology.
Yeah.
So
I think one of the
Go ahead,
key
Linda.
things, I think one of the key things too is that people don't know that you have something for sale unless you're sharing your story.
yes,
They cannot buy from you unless, I don't want to say that you're always pitching, but you're always,
the
if,
ABCs of closing, or the ABCs of sales, always be closing, right?
yeah, um, people have to know that you have something that they can buy.
Yep. And
Like
on
I
that
said,
note, I would like to break
I
down.
see a
I
spreadsheet.
don't believe in the type of mentality that is predicated uh, with like the ABCs of sales. For anybody who doesn't know, it was a movie in the 80s or 90s, somewhere in there. Glenn Ross, where there's a group of salespeople that are sitting in an office, and Alec Baldwin walks in and writes ABC on the board, and it stands for always be closing. A guy tries to get coffee, and he says, "No, only winners get coffee, um, or only closers get coffee." Fun fact: I tried to show that I haven't seen the clip in a very long time, and I tried to play it in one of my classes, and thought I was going to HR because it is very vulgar.
Yeah.
It's hilarious. But I think you're getting back to the initial comment where you feel you're somewhat an introvert in terms of, and even your training. Maybe there's another book in you, Successful Selling for Introverts, based on this model you're talking about right now. I mean, really, I mean, seriously, I mean,
Yep.
it could be. I'm always got ideas for you, Rob.
I appreciate it. All right. So the plan of attack today, we will talk about, well, we've already done a little bit of it, of talking about what sales looks like today and trying to overcome some of the ideas of what sales is and what it isn't. Then we'll dive into the story of Socrates, who was literally murdered for asking questions. Then we'll talk about some of the enemy mistakes, things that we see on a regular basis that you definitely should not do. Then the strategic cheat code will break down the lessons that you can learn from Socrates. Not that I want you to go out and get murdered, but he was so powerful with his questions that the Roman Greek government literally murdered him. Then the debriefing, how we can take what he learned and make it operational. And then we have, of course, again, 3 different ways that you can go from being a complete beginner in sales to mastering it the way Socrates did. Moving on. Okay, so the battlefield today. First, I wanted to put this all into context and how this plays out and to what we've already learned. So I said earlier that you have to start, in my opinion, you'll probably have different opinions, but in my opinion, you have to start with the strategy because the strategy sets the battlefield. It helps you identify your target or your place in the market, and it helps you understand who the enemies are, I guess, the way that we've put it, and who your competitors are. And if you don't understand that, then you can go out into the sales arena and really shoot yourself in the foot by not understanding who you're competing against, or maybe your strategy doesn't line up well with some of your other competitors. So you can really waste a lot of time and money doing sales if you don't understand your place in the market. Then you have to understand your branding. We've talked a lot about your brand is really your why. And if you don't understand your authentic why and you go out and you're trying to sell, then you come off as scammy. And that's the used car concept. By the way, I make fun of a lot of used car salesmen in this. I know some very good car salesmen. It's just a low-hanging fruit and an easy target to pick on because there are a lot of bad ones, but there are some good ones too. So if anybody's in the car world, don't get your panties in a wad.
I know that was the analogy you were going to say.
That's a guy.
It'll be
That's a guy
fine. Get some thick skin. If you want to be in sales, you have to have thick skin.
That you do.
I've been called every name in the book. It's fine. Get over it. So,
Well, I think one of the key things with that is like none of it's personal, right? Like it's business. You've got to have thick skin so you don't take it personal because it's not about you personally. It's about whatever's you're selling. They're not interested or they don't want it right now.
You never know what's going on in their world,
Exactly.
Well, we also have primal instincts in mind. There's a book I think everybody should read called 7 Primal Instincts. And one of mine is I need to be loved and I can't stand rejection. It's just whatever. So when I first started doing sales, the reason they didn't buy because the product either sucked or I gave a poor presentation, they didn't buy because it was me. And that's a hard thing to overcome sometimes because if you are feeling you want to be likable, so I think you're right. The personality traits of people, particularly your own sometimes, prohibits you from being a good salesperson.
And I don't think I mean, I'm not the best salesman. I figured out how to be decent for what I need. But in my opinion, you'll never get away from that. I had a meeting a couple weeks ago, and it was just a personality clash. She never called me back. I could tell during the meeting that we weren't, to use your word, Mindy, we weren't vibing.
I love it.
So,
How do you brand, Mindy?
It doesn't matter how good you get at this, you're always going to experience some level of rejection. Now, you can figure out how to mitigate some of that. You can become more targeted, more focused, and reach people that you know that you're going to work well with. but you're still going to run into it eventually. So, um, where were we? Marketing. So we talked about marketing, and Clayton and I both talked about an analogy. I like the fishing analogy. He likes the hunting analogy, but they both say the same thing. I like to think of marketing as fishing with a drag net. So if you've ever done that, it's a huge weighted net. You throw it out in the water, and it kind of wraps around a bunch of fish. This is how commercial fishermen work. But it scoops up everything in the vicinity. And so that's what your marketing does. It's trying to pull a lot of people into understanding what your customer base is. Where sales is like fishing with a fishing pole and a very specific lure. So you can have lures specifically for bass or catfish doesn't use lures, and I don't understand enough about fishing to continue going. I probably should have stopped at bass fishing.
You use the gun analogy.
Yeah, sure. I can talk better about guns. Clayton's analogy with marketing is it's like a shotgun. So a shotgun sprays a pattern of BBs as opposed to a rifle that has one slug that is very focused. So the other thing I'll point out is every marketing person seems to think they're in sales, and every salesperson thinks they're in marketing. I think they're very different. They have very different missions and objectives. Kyle Golding and I have this argument a lot, and I love it. I like debating, so I think it's a fun debate.
That you think they're so different because they're different, but they have to work together. They have to work in tandem. Otherwise, the sales guys can't and gals, they can't make the sale if marketing's not doing their job.
Right.
And vice versa. If sales isn't doing their job, then nobody eats. So,
exactly.
I've been in situations where sales and marketing didn't get along, and one of the worst feelings in the world is to show up to your pitch and get all the way through your pitch, and then somebody pulls out the marketing campaign, and they're like, "That's not what your ad says," and you're like, "Oh shit!"
Yeah,
it makes you look dumb. It makes your company look dumb. It makes your client think that you're hiding something or covering something up. It's bad all the way around. So your sales and marketing have to be in line.
Yeah.
The other thing is typically when we talk about sales, we've already touched on this a little bit, but people think it has to be something slimy and very inauthentic because you're asking for money. It makes people feel very uncomfortable. But if you do it the right way and have the right mindset, it doesn't have to be that way. There's a great book I read. I think it's called Cadence, and it's about a bicycle shop owner, and he ends up befriending a consultant, and the guy doesn't like doing cross-selling. The bicycle shop owner doesn't like cross-selling. He thinks it's slimy. And the consultant switches his mindset of, okay, if people are coming into your bike shop to buy a bike, it's because they're not experienced enough just to order one online. So they are actually looking for an expert opinion. So when you sell a bike, it is not slimy. It's actually helping them out to say, okay, well, if you're going to start biking, you probably need to have some spare tubes. You probably need to have a water bottle. You probably need to have a helmet. Yep. So it was a mind shift for him to think about him offering the cross sells as a service rather than just pitching something else.
Yeah, as opposed to, would you like fries with that Coke?
Yeah, but I mean, the other thing too is if you're not offering, let's say like you only have the bike and you don't have the helmets and like all the accessories, like people don't want to have to go to multiple places to get fully outfitted for a hobby, right? Which is why your sports stores carry all of those things because they want to make the full sale.
That's actually really
fully, customer service oriented.
Yep.
So yeah, it makes sense you've got to cross sell. But the other thing, as far as making sales slimy, I mean, people are looking for the product or service that you have. And so it becomes about pitching them like, do you want to keep going? Do you want to keep living the life that you're living? Or do you want to look at something different? What might that look like? You're selling opportunity. You're selling options. You're selling solutions. That's not as slimy when
Yep.
you're selling their, if they've painted the picture of what that opportunity looks like, that's what you're selling.
Perfect example of this is I told you my mom was my avatar for Stretch Lab, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we sold a lot of equipment to continue on stretching. And one in particular we sold, it was basically a ball that you can, lay on and get muscle cramps and stuff, knots out. And my mom goes in and gets stretched. And the lady that was stretching her didn't know who my mom was. So she didn't know that it was my mom. And at the end of it, instead of saying, "Oh, we've got this ball right here that you can roll around on and get knots out," she goes, "Well, we've got this ball, but it's $15 and you can go over to Target and get the same thing for, $5." And my mom was pissed, number one, because that takes a sale away from me. But number two, she's like, I don't know what I'm looking for. And I don't want to spend all day going over to Walmart or Target to try to find what you're talking about. Just sell me the damn thing now. And I had to talk to this. We ended up firing her for the same thing, but yeah. But it goes back to our avatar. My mom's time was worth more than the $10 that she could have saved by going somewhere else. So it's about understanding your client to draw that back around. All right, I think we covered everything there. So Socrates. I love Socrates. I love Stoic philosophy, and Socrates was one of the original Stoic philosophers. He was so impactful that he influenced people. Even decision makers today still reference the way that he thought about the world. Considered one of the greatest philosophers of all time. And by the way, I grew up watching Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, and if I say Socrates, it's because every time I see Socrates written out, because all I think of is, Socrates. So he was a master of questions. He actually didn't really put down his thoughts. Instead of ranting and raving about what he thought, he was great about asking you questions to make you get to the point, because if you can get there based on his questions, it is so much more powerful than telling somebody what you believe. Before we started this, we were actually talking about Charlie Kirk, which, he had a lot of philosophies and things that I didn't agree with, but I grew up with an attorney. So, going back to the thing, I understand what he was playing a lot of devil's advocate and stuff like that, but he was great about, number one, listening to what the people said. I know there's a lot of, media out there now that says, oh, he would just, yell over you and stuff, but he was actually really good about listening to what you said and then turning it around as a question to make his audience feel really stupid. And yeah, same thing here. He ends up getting murdered for it. My point is, there is a hell of a lot of power in questions. There's more power in questions than just spewing what you think you know. So to set the stage, Socrates is in an environment where there's a lot of political unrest. They had just lost a major war, and he is going around on a public forum and he's asking questions to people in the public about the political leadership. And he's so effective that people are starting to turn on these political leaders. So the political leaders end up influencing a bunch of comedians. You got to understand, at this point in time, theater was on every corner, and it was a lot of how people got their information. So these comedians start mocking Socrates and making him have an image of something that he wasn't intelligent and things like that. Also, they did have they weren't necessarily newspapers, but they had something very similar. And they start running false information about him. Sounds very similar to what we experience today, right? Of false information, and anybody who has any type of intelligence in the government realm ends up being mocked at some point, I've noticed. So they go out and they finally find 3 of his former students, and they get the students to admit that they had changed their mindset, that he had changed their mindset, and that he was corrupting the youth. And at the time, it was so politically heated that that was enough to end up putting him on trial. And so they arrest him and put him on trial, and they bring in all the witnesses that talk about what he had talked about what Socrates had talked about, and the entire time Socrates stays very calm and collective, and you would expect a guy who's on trial for some bullshit to just stand up and start ranting and raving like we see people do to Charlie Kirk, or saw people do to Charlie Kirk. But instead, he waits until the very end. He gathers all of the information. And then when it's time for him to defend himself, instead of ranting and raving, he starts asking people questions. And the questions become so powerful that he actually ends up overthrowing, or he ends up convincing his jurors and audience that he wasn't in the wrong. He actually ends up calling himself the gadfly, basically like a housefly. He's a little annoying pest, but he's so detrimental to the environment because he's making people actually think about what they're doing. But long story short, the overlords, the big brothers, weren't part of the entire trial, and they come back and say, no, he's being a pest and we need to kill him. So he actually literally gets murdered for asking too many questions, which it goes back to the old saying, you don't cut somebody's tongue out because you're afraid of what they're going to say. It's that somebody might actually listen, right? Did I get that right? I feel like I got
never heard that.
Okay. Yeah. Punishment for hearsay in this time was to cut somebody's tongue out. But if nobody's listening to what the person's saying, why would you cut their tongue out? It's because he was actually making an impact, right?
Yeah.
So he does get a guilty verdict. He is sentenced to death, and then thanks to young Jamie, aka Mindy Burns, we now know that he, instead of being executed, decides to take his own life.
Just trying to make it accurate for all of our viewers.
I appreciate it. That's what young Jamie's job is.
But we also have a separate little tab on our website that says Ask Mindy.
Ask Mindy.
Thanks, guys. Thanks. I do want to point out, though, like when you were talking about how Socrates waited till the end, right, to make his statement and ask his questions. That's really the sign of true leadership, right? Mm-hmm. When you step back and you take in everything that your team is saying, or your clients or whatever, you're taking in whatever is being said before you're just like spouting whatever it is that you want done, because then nobody shares their ideas, right? So the sign of true leadership truly is for everybody else to go first.
That's a good point. There's a reason that CEOs typically start in sales. It's because sales is all about understand or figuring out how to listen to people and solve problems. So if you really listen to what we're saying, you can apply this. I mean, some of this comes from some of the marriage counseling I did. Some of it comes from leadership books, a lot of sales books, things like that. So this doesn't have to be utilized just for sales. It can be utilized for a lot of things. All right, so the enemy mistakes. What we see on a consistent basis today. Have either one of you bought a car recently?
No, it's been a while.
But I can't remember the experiences.
Yeah. But you guys have bought a car at some point, right?
Yes.
Several, what was the experience like?
I mean, Clayton, you go first. You've had the most experience out of all of us.
Well, I'm going to tell you, because whoever in my family, any big purchase, D handles it, because I go in there and say something like stupid, like, is it cheaper if we pay cash, or basically, things that tells them that we have the means to maybe buy something, and then they so Dee always likes to negotiate with everybody, and so the experience is it depends though. I think the asking the questions rather than just showing the features we're looking for, but it's pushy. I think it's not as bad as timeshare salespeople, which I've been through a few of those. But,
Me too.
but they try to tell you, and then obviously, do you have family? Do you have a dog? Do you do it to see if you need that particular size vehicle? Which I give them kudos for asking those questions, but for the most part, it's all about them. It really is. You can really sense at the end of the day, it's about them making money, not really meeting your needs. At least that's my experience.
I would agree with that. I've only had one, I guess, good buying experience, and that was, I mean, the guy wasn't pushing at all, but I knew exactly what I wanted going in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a difference when you're just like kind of browsing
Yeah.
for a car, versus like when you know exactly what you want going in. Because
Right.
if you're just gonna go browse, like go on a Sunday when the car salesmen aren't there, you can walk the lot.
They lock them up so you can't go in it. They have gates on them so you can't get in.
Yeah.
True.
Well, you can't drive around. You can hop
Right.
the gate.
Exactly.
But no, I think you highlight exactly what the issue is. People are pushy, and it makes you not want to go experience that, right?
Mhm.
And so, to bring this back around to stuff we've already taught, understanding who your competitors are, that's Carvana's entire business model, right?
Mhm.
They built an entire model based off how people feel about buying a car.
Yeah.
They don't like it. They don't like dealing with the salespeople. They don't like the back and forth. So they
Mhm.
created an entire business model of cutting all of that out.
Yeah.
I have no idea how truly successful Carvana is, but it is a perfect example of understanding your competitors.
We have a couple of people in the group. Ernie Diaz has bought several cars successfully. So has Tim Lowe from Carvana. I'm very happy with both their purchases because I looked at it one time and yeah. But you're so right. The model that they took all the reasons why people hate going to a car dealership and they capitalized on it.
And then just to your point of the creative aspects of that, when we were talking last week about marketing, if you look at Carvana's marketing, they answer those questions. They tell you exactly what they're doing. Like, you tired of going to the dealership? So are we. Here's what we did about it. That's, I guess, an example of how to be creative with understanding your competitive analysis. But I did try to buy a car. I'm sorry.
Guerrilla marketing.
Guerrilla marketing, exactly. I did try to buy a car one time in college. It was an Acura, and my mom and I went, and we got the. I actually really liked this guy. He was the goofiest person I've ever met. Shows up wearing like a leisure suit. He was straight from like the 70s and 80s, but he didn't ask me a single question. He didn't know anything about me. But we get in the car and he immediately starts with, this button does this and this gadget does this. And I'm like, cool. And then the thing that we still laugh about is he's like, okay, now stop. So I stop. He's like, okay, now put it in sport mode. And he's like, take off. This is an Acura, not, and it wasn't like the high end Acura either. But I did, like, of course, he has me floor it. He's like, man, those G forces, they make me woozy. I'm about to pass out.
Just what your mother
Mom
wants to
is
hear.
probably like, what? This is
No.
not how I want my son to be driving this car.
Exactly right. So we still make fun of that today, but that's what we like to call in the industry the show up and throw up method. When you don't ask a single question, you just start throwing out every type of facet that your product offers, and you never really. Maybe you get lucky and land something, but at the end of the day, the majority of your clients are going to feel exactly what we just talked about, that you didn't give a shit about them. You just wanted to push your product. The second big mistake I see, we were talking about this example earlier. I had the opportunity to go to an event recently with a good friend of mine who had a tag along partner, which I won't say any names of anybody. But this person, people would walk up to us and start talking, and they would ask the typical networking questions. What do you do? Well, this person had no hesitation of, oh, you're in XYZ industry? You need my product. And it was so awful to listen to. And it never made any sense. It was just, you could tell there was no thought process behind it. He just believed everybody needed his product. And people would have the same reaction. They would kind of get this, you need my product. And you could see it on their face. They're like, what did I just walk into?
How do I get out of this?
And they would turn around.
Where's the restroom? I need to go.
Exactly.
I need to get out.
I think I immediately shook my beard and said, I've got to go back to the bar. See ya. And my first thing was like, you just didn't want to stand next to him, huh? Like, yes.
Remember the technique I told you last time is when you're talking, engaging with it, you look around the room, like maybe 3 or 4 groups of people down, you recognize someone you know and say, hey, have you met Becky yet? Have you met Barbara? And just hand them off. Do it to someone that's kind of like them, then just sit back and watch them.
Uh-huh. I actually got called out on that, I think last year.
Did you?
Hey, you just stuck me with that guy, didn't you? I was like, yes, I did.
You're welcome.
All right. So the point is, don't just talk at your client because that makes it feel very scammy.
Yeah.
The other problem
for that though, like, you need my product. I think it's also about, like, if the conversation is just like you're telling them exactly what they need when you haven't asked any questions or done any, to your next point, no prep, no thought. Like, I just met you. How do you don't know anything about my business. You haven't asked me any questions, like, but you're telling me how to fix it? Like, this isn't going to work.
Exactly. I've got a thought brewing, but I think it would be politically incorrect, so I probably need to leave it. But
okay, good.
Yeah, no prep equals no thought. So take a little bit of time, research what you're talking about, or research who you're talking with, whether that's, we'll get more into what to do, but yeah, I used an example the other day. I didn't do any prep on who I was talking to and go in and pitched, how I can help somebody increase their sales. Turns out they don't need help increasing their sales. They needed help with supply chain. So I automatically was going to lose that one regardless. Reliance on handouts. I hate handouts. And I find so many salespeople get hell-bent on, I've got to have the perfect handout. Just like they get hell-bent on, I have to have the perfect logo and the perfect whatever. Handouts are great for a specific purpose. If you have something that, talks about a lot of numbers, it gets really complicated, or maybe you use like a picture. When I sold sales, sometimes I would go down, if I was pitching a specific block of seats, I would go down and take a picture of the viewpoint of the ballpark. Nice. And use it. That would actually work well. But I find this is where the sales and marketing thing starts colliding, because the marketing people want to provide you with these very fancy slide decks and things like that. And really all that does is it takes focus off you and puts all the focus on the slide. So I can see this with my students. If I give them the presentation beforehand or something like that, they're not looking at me the entire time. They're looking at the slide deck, and they don't have any knowledge of what I'm talking about. So my point is, handouts do have a purpose, but they should be used sparingly and they should be very focused. The last thing is no follow-up. So you have a really good conversation with somebody, and then it's just like, okay, bye. And then nothing ever happens because you didn't do the extra step of following up or setting the next appointment. And then the last big thing that I see on a regular basis is getting objections. Going back to what Clayton was talking about and feeling like you were putting yourself out there and now somebody's rejecting you. An objection doesn't have to be a negative. In fact, it's actually usually a positive. if they are completely not sold on what you're selling, they'll just say, okay, well, thanks, see ya. But if they have an objection, that means they're asking questions and they're actually interested in what you have to say.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like you're asking questions to learn more about their business. They're going to ask questions to better understand how your product or service can help them and be a benefit to them.
Right.
I mean, that's also a cue for you to actually kind of go back and clarify some of what you're saying, so that you can minimize those questions that you get. That becomes it. It totally makes everything more clear.
Exactly.
Yeah, we have a brother-in-law that sells for the sports animal, very successful salesperson, and he says when they say no, he looks at it, they need to know more,
Yeah.
rather than just thinking, takes it from the word no to know more. But yeah, but it is, anybody that's, we have several people that are new to their businesses, and to grow your business, you got to sell, ask for the close, and it is, to be really transparent, everybody, even though we're trying to teach you guys, folks that are watching these videos, is we don't like the objections either. I mean, we some people embrace them. I take it personally. I just think it's, so I need to be liked by everybody, and until I don't like them, I can cast them off.
So,
Right.
well,
I think mine, when I hear no, it's like, not yet.
right.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just not ready yet. Okay.
Actually, I'm going to push back on you a little bit, Clayton. The objections is actually my favorite part because it's a battle and it's competitive to the point where,
Shocker rock.
yeah, I like debating.
As we,
But
yeah.
when I was working for the Rough Riders, I would like hurry through my pitch and just to get to the objections because I knew that's where I could shine. But my boss ended up calling me in and said, "Yeah, you come off as very aggressive and you need to step back."
Well, not only do you have to be liked, you got to win too, right? So
Yeah, yeah, I have to win. That's what it is for me. But actually, I'll bring that up here in a minute again because I have another point about body language soon. All right, so taking the story of Socrates and pulling from it what we can to learn how we can utilize this in our sales practice. So you want to be the gadfly. You want to have the posture of very calm and curious and make sure that your mission is always what's driving the conversation. Remember, we talked about missions and values in your brand previously. This is literally where it comes face to face with your clients. And so you want to make sure that you are staying on brand. And that can mean a lot of different things. I had a client, DD Audio, and when I first started with them, I didn't quite understand authenticity in sales, right? And so I walk in, and these guys are wearing like shorts and flip flops and t-shirts, and I'm coming from banking, so I'm sitting there going, "What the hell?" But I finally figured out like the whole company was started by oh, why can't I think of his name right now? Either way, the CEO of the company started this in his garage, and he started it because he couldn't find a speaker that he liked, so he built his own. And so once I understood more about the brand, that this is something for the DIYers, that it is supposed to be a more laid back approach, then having the flip flops and stuff in the business place made a lot more sense to me. And I think if they tried to go a very corporate route, it would have it would have backfired on them because it didn't reflect their brand. Actually, there's so much power, just to point this out, there's so much power in the way that you dress and present yourself. I love doing weird experiments on people, and it doesn't pan out well for me 90% of the time, so I won't recommend that. But I one time when I was working in a bank branch, I had a desk that was right in front of the door. And so people would walk in and they would see me, and we were required to wear like polos and slacks, right? People would always walk in, look at me, and then go straight to my boss's office. So I had to sit there and think, okay, how do I get more people to stop and talk to me? So I started wearing a suit, and it was crazy. I think my conversion rate went from like 10, 15% to almost 90%, where people would actually stop and talk to me 90% of the time as opposed to walking on. So there is a lot of power in the suit. Now, I don't want that to be misinterpreted that any sales pitch you're on, you have to wear a suit. In fact, I would advise against that. And I would say, make sure that your dress and your body language mirror your brand. Yeah. So nobody wants to talk to a fitness instructor who's wearing a suit. I wouldn't trust that guy. Yeah. But if I show up to the gym and my trainer is wearing what I would expect a trainer to wear, then I have more credibility, right? Same thing with bankers. If I walk in and the banker's wearing flip-flops, I'm probably not going to trust the banker. But if he's wearing a suit, I'm going to have a lot more trust. So it depends on who you're trying to sell to and what your brand presence is.
Yeah, I have a girlfriend that it's a banking reference. She 6 figures taking in checks, and the girl, the teller looks like she just rolled out of bed. Mm-hmm. And she's pretty good friends with the people that manage this bank. So they just called and were chatting about, their kids and stuff. And my friend was just like, hey, by the way, I had this experience and I'm giving over a lot of money to put into my account for someone that looks like they just rolled out of bed and could care less that it's my money. Mm-hmm. Like the way she was talking to me, the way she's like, I'm not saying they have to be, in a suit, because that's not the way the banks handle business in this particular town. But she's like, could they at least, look put together, have like not on a baggy sweatshirt? I mean, it was just so drastically different from the way she perceives herself and values, the money that she makes, that it's like, what the heck?
Right. My entire brand is that I am more approachable than the bank, right? Mm-hmm. I love suiting up. I would wear a suit every day and be perfectly happy with it. But I have found that while it does have a lot of power, it can also turn a lot of people off. And so I try to do the research about who my client is. And if it's somebody that is very high up, I'll probably wear a suit. But if it's somebody that I can tell has more of a blue collar personality, I dress like this, like a collared shirt. I still try to be professional, but I do not want to wear a suit.
Yeah.
In fact, when I was in sales in Dallas, my territory was Harry Hines, which if you've ever been to Dallas, Harry Hines is not the best place to be. We had to wear a tie, and I had so many people wouldn't even let me in the door if I had a tie on, or they'd tell me to take it off. It was just one of those things that turned so many people off.
Yeah. There's a nonprofit here in town that she is, and it's very different for men versus women in how you show up. It just is. Mm-hmm. Regardless of all the gender bias and all that. I mean, I think we know it's just different. And she was speaking to trades. Women in trades, and she was showing up in full-on pink and the pink hard hat, the pink power suit, and that's great. She looked fabulous, but her audience is trying to downplay the fact that there are women working in a man's world as automotive techs, as electricians, as carpenters, plumbers, all of that. It's like, I don't want to be called out for being a woman. I just want to go do a good job and, make my money off of the fact that I'm doing good work. And so knowing your audience, who you're talking to, if they're not suit people, don't come in your power suit. Yes. But if they're just like you and I, everyday people, then, I mean, you got to be put together. You got to look put together.
Right.
And not look like you just rolled out of bed. So.
Clayton looks like he's talking, but I can't hear him.
Clayton, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Important point. Now, basically, we talked about before, if you want to become like somebody else in your industry and you feel that you're not at the top and there's 5 or 6, you need to see how they portray themselves to their salespeople, how their people look like going out in the field, because it's kind of mimicking, think of what you want to become beforehand. And if you're going to be in the business field like all of us are, we need to look like we're business people, and I know you got the outlines of the shorts, which I'm in 99% of the time. But I think when you're out public portraying your image, you've always got to look professional, I think, and whatever you feel that is, but for your industry. But I do think that there is a certain attire that business coaches like us need to have, because who's going to believe us? If we're going to call ourselves leaders, which I'm calling, I consider myself a professional leader because I was paid from a Chamber of Commerce for 7 years to run networking. So I'm a professional. That if we're going to portray that image, we've got to look like that image. And I think that's why we've got to cut ourselves above everybody else in our fields, because I don't want to show up, even though I have work with a lot of tradespeople, they expect me, if I'm going to lead them, not look like them, if that makes any sense in some cases.
Yeah. I mean, when I was in the construction industry, I was actually talking with a general contractor the other day, and they've got a consultant, and he was like, "Yeah, she came in, with high heels and da 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 da," and I was like, "Okay." Having worked in that industry, that's not how. If you were working with me, that's not how I would have come into your office, because if I wanted to be taken seriously on the construction site, I had to I had to be in my steel toes. I had to be in jeans. I couldn't wear open-toed sandals like I love to wear. So there are things. I mean, Clayton, I guess to your point, there's sometimes you do have to dress more of the part, depending upon where you're at.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. So make sure you're on brand, whatever that means to you, and then start with simple, sharp questions. You want to start trying to understand. If you start with questions that are way out in left field or they're way too big and broad, then you're going to turn your client off. If you start just ranting and raving at them, they're automatically going to get turned off. So you want to start with simple questions and sharp questions, not speeches. And then next is run the 4-step path, which I'll break down in the next slide. But it's understanding where you're at, understanding the lay of the land, understanding the challenges that your clients are facing, and then really you want to turn up the heat and let them just vent, and then show a better picture. And this is a lot of how Socrates would, and Charlie Kirk was great at this too, where he would try to get a basic understanding of who he was talking to, what they believed. A lot of times his audience couldn't get past that. But then he would ask them, okay, what are the specific challenges you're facing? And then kind of let them continue on to the point where once he gathered all the information, it was easy for him to turn it back around on him. And he usually made him look stupid, which,
one comment too, I think the questions are really important, is that you've got to research the company or that business person as much as you know about them, because you don't want to ask them a question that you don't have an answer to. You can't be. They may ask, like in the digital business, they may ask me a question like, "What's SEO?" If I don't know what SEO is, or if I don't know what analytics are, or I don't know what, it makes you seem stupid. So you've got to do enough. Some of the questions you got to lead them down the road so there's an answer you can reasonably answer, and not look like a fool. Because if you don't have no clue, what is like in Mindy in the auto industry, if they talk about some kind of a new whatever in the automotive field, and you don't know anything about that, all of a sudden, why would they do business? So I think these questions that you ask them have to be tailored, that you have somewhat of an answer.
Right. Exactly.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Then moving on, we want to make the stakes real. So we want to show how their problem or how our solution can actually fix their problem. I think a lot of salespeople have this idea that because we understand how their solution would fix their problem, that they should understand it too. And that's not always the case. Sometimes your client's just not connecting all the dots. And then you want to mirror their words. So if there's specific brand industry language that you have to use, I actually got in trouble with this the other day. So I still, just to point out that you're not always going to be perfect, but I'm working on a project in the energy industry, and there's a specific way that people like to see numbers broken out, and it didn't make sense to me because I'm a banker, not a energy consultant, but it turned the people off that I was pitching to because I didn't present it in that way.
Right.
So you have to your point, understanding the industry norms and language is very big.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so how do we make this operational? All right, we've kind of beat the dead horse on the gadfly posture. Keep calm, curious, and on brand. And then to your point, Clayton, you want to do a little bit of research. I feel like I ran into this when I first started in sales, where I would spend more time researching people than I would actually calling. So there is a sharp cliff. That's why I say 10 minutes. In 10 minutes, you can look them up on LinkedIn. You can understand kind of their hobbies, their interests, things like that based off their social media. You want to look at things going on in the industry. Things change a lot, especially in certain industries. You want to make sure that you're up to date. And then timing can be very interesting as well. The best example I have is if you're calling on CPAs, don't try to reach them in April. You're only going to piss them off. So their CPAs are so busy in April that you're not going to get a hold of them. So don't call them. So understand kind of the seasonality of the industry, understand the timing of how people work. So CEOs are usually in the office before anybody else. And if you can figure out how to reach them, then you can bypass gatekeepers and get to them directly.
Yeah. I think the quick news, I mean, the latest real world example was the tariffs, right?
Yes.
For oil and gas, for automotive, for a lot of industries, like the tariffs affected their pricing on a daily, if not hourly rate.
Yes.
And so you've got to pay attention. If you're going after those industries, you need to be cognizant, I guess, and recognize you're not their priority at the moment, right? So timing is critical.
Yep. Absolutely.
You can take that LinkedIn profile, run it through some AI apps out there. It'll give you the bullets or anything featured on them to make it so you don't have to read through all the whole bio, but it will actually pop up and give you the even new industry trends through some good AI tools.
Quick example of this. I one time had a client. He became a client. I looked him up on LinkedIn and realized that he wrote children's books, and
Really?
which I thought was just cool. I spent the entire time talking to him about his children's books. Never even got to my pitch, and at the end of it, I was like, "So you're gonna buy some baseball tickets, right?" He's like, "Oh hell yeah!" So because I understood what he did. And he appreciated that I took the time to look him up. Like we ended up bonding over that instead of whatever. I mean, he was going to buy something anyway. He just decided he liked me better than the other guys that had just gone in and pitched him shit. So, all right. The next thing is listen. So one of my favorite quotes is, "We all have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason." It's because we should listen twice as much as we talk. And so you want to, the perfect sales pitch is you listen 80% of the time and only talk 20% of the time after you gather all of the information and know exactly how to pitch the person. Then we talked about the question funnel. So the lay of the land. So you want to start off with you think of how a funnel works. It starts off with a big base at the opening and then narrows it down to a very slender funnel, right? So you want to start off with open-ended questions. An open-ended question is something like, well, tell me about the problem that you have, or tell me about your business, or tell me about your project. And the reason you want to ask open-ended questions first is because they will end up telling you exactly what their problem is instead of you assuming or guessing. If you go in and you say, well, is your problem XYZ? I'm like, oh, yeah, maybe. But you're not going to get to the real root of the problem. If you ask an open-ended question, like, well, tell me about your business, they will go off on all sorts of tangents. There may be something that you never even thought of as an issue that you can uncover. So I like to start off with something basic. Tell me about your project. Tell me about your business. And then my next question is, okay, what are the specific challenges that you're facing? And usually you're there. They've taken the time to talk to you because they think that you have a solution to their challenges, but sometimes it may not be on their radar. But you can understand where their thought process is going with their challenges and how it's impacting them. And once you get a broad list of the problems, then you want to start narrowing it down into the ones that you can actually help them solve. So you want to turn up the heat, ask them pinpointed questions about that specific problem that you can solve. And really at this point, you're playing therapist. You want them to vent and rant and rave, because if they start getting emotional about it, they're going to tell you exactly how they want you to solve the problem. So your pitch is basically in the bag already. And then the last one is the closed-ended question. You do the math, you show them how to make it work, you show them exactly how you can fix their solution, and then you say, is that something you think will work for you? And it should be a yes or no question. There's several different philosophies on setting up yes questions. My publisher has a philosophy on setting up no questions because it makes them stop and think. If you can just get it down to a narrow question of yes and no, then you're ahead of the curve, I promise. So next, when you do solve the problem, so after you get through the questions, you understand exactly how to pitch them. You want to make sure that you're presenting things in their terms. So, some people don't. In my world, it's not always about making more money. Sometimes it's about making a bigger impact. But more money can lead to bigger impact. But if I go straight into, if I'm talking to some nonprofit organizations, I think would be a great hypothetical. If I go straight into, well, I can get you X, Y, and Z amount of money, it may just go completely over their head. And I've had these conversations where, I'm having a monetary conversation, and you can just see their, they look like a goldfish in a bowl. Just, it has nothing to do with them. But if I put it in how that money can help them impact whoever they're trying to help, then all of a sudden it starts registering and making sense. Then we'll talk about landing the plane, asking for the sale, shutting up when you actually get confirmation of the sale, and then what the follow-up looks like. And then the very last thing is asking for the referral, because it's so much cheaper to ask for a referral. You're already coming in with a warm lead instead of a cold lead, and you already have you're getting introduced by somebody who's already utilized either knows you and they're referring you out, or they've utilized your product and can give you a better introduction. All right, so tactical takeaways. How can we actually put all of this into action? I will start this by saying this is the basis of a script. Now, I have a love-hate relationship with scripts. I love them for beginners or people who are in new businesses or people who are just starting with a new company, because you can map out how you use your brand language. And oh, this is one of my favorite stories. One of the very first sales pitches I ever went on, when I first became an outside sales rep, I get in there and I start off, hitting my pitch really good, and then my mind just goes blank. And I couldn't think of what to say next. And it got so awkward that the guy was like, do you need to come back? Or like, where'd you go?
Yeah.
If you have a script, because this is going to happen to you, if you have a script, you have something to fall back on. So if you get to a point where you're stuck and you have your script memorized, then you can fall back and pick it up right where you left off. But now, some of the problems with scripts are, if you have a really experienced salesperson, they're not learning your script. That's just they're not going to do it. Also, if you rely heavily on a script, you can start to sound robotic. Do you guys get a lot of robocalls and things like that? Spam?
Yes.
And you can tell they're reading off a script.
Mm-hmm.
What you give a lot of attention to those people?
I asking them questions.
It becomes a game, right?
Yeah, totally a game.
Yeah.
Or otherwise I just hang up the phone.
Yeah, exactly.
The funniest example of not following a script, if you guys are familiar with Tommy Boy, where Tommy Boy goes out and tries to make some sales, and he just basically loses his mind on half the presentations, then he finally gets to be himself and just lays it out, he closes the sale, yeah.
He's lighting cars on fire in the test.
Yeah, but he studied script after script, but he didn't make it his script. That was the big thing that I think that's what you're talking about, Rob.
Yeah, and that's eventually where I'll get to is, okay, write your script, get very comfortable with it, and once you start getting comfortable with it, then you can start making it your own. Now, Mindy, you have a lot more experience managing people, and you do not want me managing your people, trust me. I'm going to phrase this as a statement, but it's actually a question to you.
Okay.
I think new salespeople or new people to your company should have a very strict script. Like you want to say it word for word, and it's not until you don't ever tell them you can make it your own until they have enough experience to do that. True or false?
I think it depends what you're selling.
No, fair point.
So part of the time that's true. Other times it's false because there's some personalities that are just phenomenal salespeople. They just mesh and vibe with their people really quickly who they're trying to sell. And so it's easy for them. I think it becomes more of the thing if they're selling a widget of some sort or a service. They need to study and train what that product, widget, service, what it is, what it can and can't do. They need a full immersion of its features, functions, benefits before they should be really released to go sell it, out on their own.
Right.
That's my take on it anyway.
So you've got a lot of experience in managing sales teams. What's your take on scripts?
I think when you have something new, a script is good to study. That way you can definitely fall back on it. But I mean, to Clayton's point with Tommy Boy, I mean, they've got to make it their own.
Right.
So if we want to start with here's the script of all the features, functions, benefits, all of that, great. But I'm encouraging you, make it your own.
Yes.
But if you promise something that we cannot do, it's on you to go back to that client to say, I misspoke. Because I hate being sold a service, like let's say it's an online platform service, and the sales guys promised me everything that I needed. And then when I talk to the engineer and the implementation team, they can't follow through on half.
Yes.
And that's the reason that I went with them.
Yeah.
And so, I've gotten better with getting really specific with what I need and go, I want an implementation person on this call. I need to know if what you're saying is actually able to happen.
Right. Yep. I've ran into that too.
So.
All right. So this is how I create scripts. Like I said, I think it's very important for anybody who's in sales to have one and structure it, but with the caveat that you have to make it your own. So if you're brand new to sales, I would encourage you to memorize the script. If you've got some experience and you're comfortable going off script and you're not going to start lighting cars on fire like Tommy Boy, then you can make it your own after that, right? Okay, so my script is pretty simple. You want to ask the initial question. You want to ask it open-ended. Tell me about your product, your service, your project, whatever. And then once they talk about it, then you start with, okay, have you ever heard of us? Like, where do I need to start on this pitch is kind of what you're asking. If they have heard of you, then you can touch lightly on the brand story that we created, making sure that you're reiterating the things that you stand for, why you're there. If they haven't heard of you, then you need to go all the way back to the brand story to make sure that you're setting the baseline of who you
Excuse
are.
me, Rob. Do we have a slide for this one? I'm just curious. I'm not seeing it on my end.
It's the opening. Are you familiar with us?
Okay, good. Okay.
Yeah. So that'll set you up to create the questions. It'll help build your reputation. It'll help you create some synergy and find common ground with everybody, right? Then you want to start with the questions using the 80-20 principle. So you want to start with the open-ended questions of the lay of the land. We've already talked about, you already asked them what's your project about, so you already kind of understand that. If you do a really good job of studying them beforehand, you can probably get to a point where you can start skipping the lay of the land because you've already done the research for it. But if it's something where you're really coming in cold, you want to make sure you get the lay of the land. You want to understand what the industry's like, what their role in the industry and company is like. You want to make sure you're talking to decision makers. Or if you're not talking to a decision maker, okay, what's the next step? So you can understand, can you really go for a close on this, or do you have to go for a follow-up meeting? Both are good in their own right, but it's very beneficial to understand who you're actually talking to. And it starts the conversation in a way that they feel like they can start opening up. Then you get into the challenges. Okay, what are the biggest challenges you face? And let them just talk. Remember, we're going back to the listening, the active listening principle of the 80-20 rule. You want them to talk 80% of the time. You only talk 20% of the time. And what's really good in the challenges is once they've talked about their challenge, then you want to restate it. So, okay, if I'm understanding you correctly, what you said was X, Y, and Z. And that lets them know that you are actually listening and that you actually understood the problem. And I've had it a lot of times where I'll do that and either I misunderstood what they were saying or I didn't quite grasp the entire thing. So that gives you a chance to make sure that you're not just assuming something. You're actually going back, reinstating what they just said, and making sure you're on the right path.
Yeah, I think another question to ask in the challenge area is if you could alleviate this stress, this frustration, this challenge, this problem, how would that open up the business for you? Or how would that open up your time? Or, you could find more solutions that you can provide that way. If you go, okay, if this were to be solved, how would that benefit the company?
Exactly. And that's a good way. We just talked about making sure you present your solution in their terms. So if you ask them that question, then you understand what they actually want out of the deal. So if they want to make more money, then you can present it in a monetary aspect. If they want to make more impact, then you can present it in that. Then you want to turn up the heat. We've already discussed a little bit about this. Yes, I'm restating all of it and how this works into your sales pitch. Then you want to have the questions prepared of, okay, this is a specific challenge that I want to focus on. And then, exactly right of, okay, this is how I understood the problem. Here's what I can do. Here's my solution. Does that benefit you in XYZ form?
And sometimes, Rob, I've used the questions either on a PowerPoint, asking them questions, or sometimes actually have a form that you act like it'll help you remind the questions you need to know, but act like you're really taking that one. Act like to really take down some notes when they answer the question, because it shows that you're paying more attentive. So it helps the person presenting because they either have a PowerPoint or a questionnaire they're filling out. And also, I think that it lets the person you're talking to know that you're really taking down some notes so you can give them a great proposal. So.
I have been told to ask for permission before you start taking notes because it can make some people feel really uncomfortable. Nobody's ever told me no, but
no, I never asked.
Yeah.
I think
now I use my collar camera. I have a camera on my collar and record the whole thing.
I think it depends on the business too. Like if you're going in and talking with a government agency or whatever, I mean, yeah, you're gonna have to sign an NDA or something.
Right.
And based off of what type of service you provide, you could very clearly stay up front. Hey, before our meeting, if it makes you feel more comfortable, I have an NDA, or I'm willing to sign an NDA for the work that we might potentially get into if that makes you feel more comfortable, because I have some questions that I would like to better understand about your business.
Exactly. Let's see, where are we at? Turn up the heat. Paint the better picture. So once you do paint the better picture, show them exactly how you can help them increase or decrease whatever it is that their problem is. And then we used to be told you never want to leave a meeting without a next step, whether that's you get their credit card and you're running the credit card, or it's, okay, can I follow up with you in 3 days? Whatever that looks like to you. Never, never, never leave a meeting just open-ended. Make sure you always have a follow-up.
You mean no, okie dokie? Like a Tommy boy. Oh, I don't want, hey, Mr. Miles, I don't want to buy from you. And you go, okie dokie, right?
That's another Tommy Boy one. Did he do that?
Yeah, he did, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you just watch that movie, Clayton?
No, but I think I'm going to have to go watch that again because I love. I mean, there's a lot. There really is a lot of stuff in that in terms of sales. It's kind of cool.
I actually used the phrase the other day, well, I can get a great look at a T-bone by sticking my head up a bull's ass, but I'd rather take the butcher's word for it.
Yeah.
Oh my classic. It's a classic.
And then ask for the referral. I don't want to get too complicated on the follow-up steps now because this is the beginner stage, right? If you just keep these things in mind and try to do it, you're already ahead of 90% of salespeople. But if you want to take it to the next level, we can get way more intricate on follow-ups and things like that. So the intermediate level of sales is understanding your objections. Now, remember we talked in marketing about surveying people and understanding their philosophies, ideas, thoughts, problems, things like that. This is a great way. If you start writing down the problems that you're running into, taking the notes, why did they object? Even if it's something that you could handle easily, you can start keeping track of what the most common objections are and how to overcome them before they even come up. So I would say a large percentage of the objections you're going to get are, I don't have the money, or I don't have budget. And usually I will say that's a cop-out. Usually it has something, there's something deeper going on. But if you start writing those down, then you can pre-plan your overcoming the objections. We should probably explain what an objection is first, right? So an objection is somebody saying they do not want your product for whatever reason. It's, maybe they say something like, oh, it's just not the right time. I don't understand the benefit. I don't have the money. That's considered an objection. Going to your point, Clayton, the hardest objections to overcome are when they just say no. That means they're not interested at all. But if they have a reason for why they can't do it, that's a good time to start digging more into it. It doesn't have to be a bad thing. In fact, that usually means that they're thinking about it. And if they're thinking about it, then you have more opportunity. And sometimes it's just you thought you did a really good job of explaining something, and it turns out they didn't quite hear it, or maybe you completely missed it, thought you talked about it. All of those things have happened to me. And if you continue to push back, not aggressively, because I had that problem, then you can overcome it and come back. You can circle back around to either clarifying or understanding more about the problem or whatever.
Yeah, that's even taking a deeper dive, even on it's too expensive or I don't have the money. Now, what is it about the money? Is that you can't do the lump sum right now, or would you like to do monthly pay? I think there's some, we could actually, when we meet, talk about this topic. There's some deeper dives we can take in about overcoming a little more detail in each one of these objections.
Yeah,
For sure.
absolutely.
Because I think people will find a way. They will find a way to really get what you are providing, whether that's a product or sale or service.
Right.
If you connect on such a level, they're going to find a way. They're going to, I mean, they're not going to not feed themselves and their kids, but maybe they're going to go out to eat less, right?
Right.
Or maybe they're going to stop picking up coffee and just have coffee at home so that they can actually afford your service. But you definitely don't want to assume it's because it's too high.
Right.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, for $5 a day for a Starbucks coffee, you can have this. Yeah, I think it's because there's a lot of strategies on sales. At least on the selling side, the objections. Like you said, if you prepare for all your objections, you're going to have an answer for them to help them overcome that.
Yeah, I've read entire books about overcoming objections, and we're trying to break this down into a couple minutes. So
yeah, now,
we're
isn't that
actually
something?
over timing.
A quick thing, didn't people say that there's a book out there or a phrase, people don't like to buy, but they love to be sold? That's that interaction, that learning more about. I think that's the phrase, but they want to know that you're listening to them because you're dealing with their problem as opposed to just in buying something. So I think it does go. People don't like to buy, they like to be sold.
Yeah. I mean, everybody wants to be heard and acknowledged.
I was going to say,
They want that validation. There's not a single human being on earth that doesn't want to be acknowledged and validated.
I'm not familiar with the actual phrase that you're discussing, so maybe this is on the same page, but I would say people hate being sold in the sense that we were just talking about, the typical salesman is just going to sit there. This is what being the pushy guy, but they love being heard and understood. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, so objections are buying signals. That means they're actually paying attention, especially if they have a reason. And then I have my acronym because every good sales book should have an acronym, and that's LAYER. And it means absolutely nothing. But so when you handle objections, you want to make sure that you're listening. So many people get offended that they just tune out, and then it becomes a battle, and they just want to, assume that the customer just doesn't know anything, or they want to assume that the customer doesn't like them or something like that. But if you actually listen to what they're saying, you can, like I said, you can go back to it, or you can try to clarify something that you missed. Maybe you forgot a spot, something like that. You want to acknowledge it. So going back to the being heard thing, I hear you. I understand what you're saying. I don't know. I guess I can leave it at that. But then
I feel your pain.
I feel your pain. Exactly. What was the one I used to say? There was one that this is not politically correct, and this might get me in trouble. This is what I was taught. I'm not saying use this. It's a funny example. But we were taught when people said, "Oh, I've got to ask my wife." Say, "Oh, I completely understand. Does she wear the pants in the family?"
What? No. That's terrible.
Yeah,
People
don't do
don't use
that.
that.
Don't
Nobody
do that.
uses that. Nobody used that.
You can't go back. I completely understand. I don't want to make any major decisions without getting clarification from my wife. But
Yeah.
if you show her that you can save X amount of money or you can earn more, whatever, do you think she's really going to be upset about it?
That's much better.
Yeah, exactly. So you want to understand, you want to explore it. Make sure that you're understanding their objection correctly. And then the best way I've ever been taught, Billy Widener taught me this was it 15 years ago, and it's something I still utilize today. It's the feel, felt, found method. Especially if you need time, because sometimes I get stumped on objections and I need to think about what they're saying. By the way, I'd like to point out that a lot of salespeople think they have to have something right away. But if you ask for a second to think about it, people actually have the opposite react. The assumption is that you look like you're dumb, right? But I think most clients actually value that you're actually stopping to think about it. So if you say, just give me a second to think through that, I think the majority of clients would actually appreciate it rather than assume you don't know what you're talking about. But the feel, felt, found method gives you time to think on your feet. And so the feel, felt, found method is, oh, I completely understand how you feel. I've had a lot of clients that have felt the same way, but what we have found is whatever. And so if it's a money thing, oh, I completely understand how you feel. Times are tough right now. The economy's not doing great. I've had a lot of people who felt very similar in the way that you're feeling, that money's tight and you got to figure out a way around it. But, as I said earlier in my sales pitch, I can help you save $300 a month, or I can help you earn $300 a month. So a lot of my clients found that actually helped them fix the problem that they were actually worried about from the beginning. Then you want to, going back to the original objection. I've talked about this a couple times, but usually the very first objection is not the real issue. So you want to make sure you ask why about 3 different times. And take this with a grain of salt, because if you just sit there and go, why, it's going to sound weird, right? So be creative on how you get there.
Yeah.
Okay, so money is the issue. Okay, what is it? Is it a budgetary issue, or is it, do you need to move to a monthly payment, like Clayton said? And then continue to ask and drill down into it at least 3 times before you try to answer it. Then go back to the simple math. You already showed them how to make money or handle their challenge. Maybe it didn't make sense to them. Maybe you need to go back to it. So go back to, well, I've already talked about, this could save you XYZ money. Does that make sense, or do we need to look at that again? And sometimes you'll get there that way. And then the last one is change the pitch. So the reason this is last is because too many people are, they want to make this the first step. Oh, you don't have the money? Okay, that's fine. We can just drop the price, or, we can offer you a different solution. You do not want to do that for a couple different reasons. If you've done a good job of listening and understanding the real problem, you want to make sure that your pitch is the absolute answer. And you don't want to get off that, because then you start losing credibility. Every time you change your recommendation, you lose credibility. So it's not until you've really drilled down into the problem, you've really understood why they can or can't do what you're asking them to do, then you can start taking the next steps of, okay, well, what if we do a demo? What if we, how else can we get around that? All right, and then if you want to take it to the Socrates level, Clayton and I were joking about this. I think Clayton even brought this up last week. But you want to confirm the close, or you want to get to a point where you're comfortable, you've said what you need to say, and then just shut up.
Yeah.
Hey, don't talk yourself out of several sales like I have early on.
And one of my favorite, you can call this a sales tool or whatever, my favorite thing to do is to let it just get super weird. Just be quiet, because people will end up,
I'm
yeah,
good with the silence, the awkward pause.
yep. That awkward silence can answer so many things, and it's so simple to do if you can actually pull it off. But if you sit there, you lay your pitch out, and then you're just silent, people will get nervous and they'll end up telling you stuff that they wouldn't have told you otherwise. And so you can really figure out, this goes back to understanding what the real problem is. A lot of times they will actually give you the real problem now. And you're right. You can end up talking yourself out of a sale. I did it all the time of, yeah, you could do a home equity line, but you need to make sure that you're thinking of X, Y, and Z. And by the time I'm done talking, they're going, shit, maybe this isn't the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
So be careful with talking yourself out of it. Actually, I had this happen at a Toyota dealership once. That it seems, I think Toyota is the worst at this. But I walked in, I had exactly what I wanted. My wife was looking for a Toyota 4Runner. I told the salesperson exactly what we wanted. And he had it on the lot. And instead of just saying, okay, well, let's go figure out financing, he just kept talking and kept talking and kept talking. Finally, I was like, what are we doing here? And I ended up just leaving we never did buy from him because of that. So, make sure you ask for the referral. I used to have ask for the referral taped under my monitor because that is one of the best ways to drive new business. In fact, I would say 99% of my business now is just referral business. I talked to a banker one time that said she actually felt bad for how much money she makes because she got so good at referral business that she basically doesn't work anymore. People call her. I've worked for a lot of bankers that are that way, that they did such a good job of meeting their customers' needs and asking for referrals that people just call them now. Referrals are an easy entry point to a new lead. It's a warm introduction or maybe even a hot introduction instead of a cold call. And you have somebody who, if they're referring you out, they've probably utilized your product or at least like you enough to make the referral. So it's an easy way to get new business. And then you had what is her name? The networking tour guide. Why am I blanking on her name right now?
Ethan.
Yeah.
This is actually one of her points: is make it easy for them to introduce you to somebody else. Tell them exactly how you would like to be introduced. She goes as far as to write a script for people. That might be a little much, but if you give people an easier way to introduce you, there's a lot of people that I would love to refer out to some of my clients, but I just don't know how to introduce them.
Yeah.
So
if you go to the Network in Action profile, we actually have a question. How would you like to be introduced to? So when we send out the referral to somebody else, it has that scripting in there for you. So we
exactly.
in Network in Action, everybody's thinking about joining. We actually have an opportunity for you to fill out that yourself, how you'd like to be introduced. But that's a good
point. How many times have you guys been introduced to somebody and you're like, oh shit, don't say that. I can't do that. I can't be referred like that.
Yeah. Well, they don't do that,
Okay, and then so once you get the referrals and once you've closed the deal, there's a follow-up cadence that you should follow. This is my suggestion, but this can vary based on what you're selling, the industry that you're in, things like that. So keep that in mind. As long as you have a cadence set up, you're already doing so much better. But this is what I like to do. Day one after the close, I want to follow back up with them. Buyer's remorse is a real thing. Sometimes they get the bill and now they're terrified and they've forgotten what you've talked about. So if you follow up the day after and say, hey, just want to say thank you, following up to make sure everything's flowing the way that you want it to. If they have the actual product, this is a good time to say, can I help you set anything up? Things like that. This is not a good time to start selling them more stuff they just bought. This is not a good time to ask for referrals and stuff. We were talking about Amazon earlier. It's like as soon as you hit the buy button, they're already asking you to review the product and you haven't even used the product yet. It makes people feel very uncomfortable. So if you want to stay authentic and show that you're really giving them extra attention, not trying to push anything else, it's just, hey, just want to follow up, make sure everything's good. You're happy with what we've talked about so far, XYZ. Then, depending on when they get the product, how long it usually takes to experience your product, then you want to follow up again at a reasonable time. I would say 1 week. If they've had I think of like software, for example. If they've had it for a week, they've probably used it enough to be pissed off. So,
You didn't do your job right.
right. But how many times have you gotten like a new piece of software and you understand all the capabilities, but now you're trying to find some button on there that's not working, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
That's
this
why
is
they
the
always.
time.
That's why they always say, "Hey, do you want to do a demo?"
Right, exactly. All right, so 1 week, depending on your industry and product, give them a short amount of time to where you can follow up, make sure the experience is going exactly the way that you said it would, and then you can say, by the way, remember I asked you for a referral. I wanted to touch base on that. Ooh, I forgot a point about referrals, by the way. Um, when you ask for referrals, you want to make sure that you're very specific about what you're asking for. I used to run an experiment when I was teaching this, and I would walk into the class and I would say, because we were in Chickasha, Oklahoma, way out, I would say, hey, I'm going to Oklahoma City today. Can anybody recommend somewhere to eat? And you could see like you get kind of blank faces and nobody could really come up. Occasionally somebody would say, oh, I was just there and I ate at XYZ. Then I would say, okay, let me rephrase the question. I would say, I am going to be in Bricktown and I want Mexican food. Now, can you give me somewhere to eat? And then people can start rattling off. So when you ask for a referral, the more specific you are, the more answers you get. So if you just say, hey, do you know anybody who can utilize my services? You're going to get deer in the headlights because you're not narrowing it down enough. But if you say, hey, I know you're in the XYZ industry. Do you happen to work with any other CEOs that you think have similar problems that can utilize this? Or do you know Bob over at your competitor's company? And that helps them really narrow down in their mind who they can refer you to. So week one, or a short amount of time after you sell, then that's when you can follow up and say, hey, by the way, we talked about a referral to Bob. Just want to check in on that and see if that's something you're still willing to do for me if you haven't gotten it. Or if you have gotten it, it's always good to say, hey, I talked to Bob. Things went great. It makes people feel like they were actually appreciated. And it gives them a little bit of time to actually experience the product. Like I said, software, there's always something that's not working the way that you thought it would be. And this is a great time to say, okay, let me come help you fix that. Maybe we need more training. Maybe we need a different product, whatever. 1 month, so you want an intermediate amount of time afterwards. You can follow up, and that's when you can start saying, okay, we had a great conversation, things went well. These are the other services that I can provide or the other products I can provide. And then you want 1 year, 2 years, something like that, enough time that things have passed. And really, you're looking for a touch point, just trying to stay on in their minds as they continue to meet people. Actually, I went through this with a company that I worked with, and they ended up going. They'd never done the 1 year, 2 year touch point, and they went back to 2 years ago, and they looked at their clients that they had at that time, and 80% of them had dropped off. And all they did is reach back out to them. They already had a reputation. They'd already utilized their products, and they got like 50% of the business back. So they said that they had one of the best months they've ever had because all they did was call back through old leads. So
Yeah, I think something too. I mean, if you have a CRM, like your CRM, you can set it so that it will do these things
exactly.
or give you reminders to do these things.
Yep.
And it can be very beneficial.
Exactly. Well, that was a lot. We're an hour and a half now. I know we're trying to keep these under an hour, but you guys have any last thoughts on sales or things that we didn't cover?
Yeah, I think we're going to have some people, obviously, we work with that have more expertise in sales, that's their job is exactly selling. Majority of the people we have are business owners. So I think this is good information to here again is for us to reflect on how we do business and no one's totally expertise at it. I mean, you've got some, I only can think of one person that out there pitches himself as getting it all together is probably Tony Robbins, from all the way from management all the way to sales. But you've got these other people, just niched people, and I think that goes to show that no one person is great in everything. So that's why we need to come along beside people like you two and others to actually, maybe not even to implement it, but just challenge us to look at things differently. I think that's what you're accomplishing with these presentations.
Yeah. I think you have to sell with confidence. Like, you have to be confident in the product or solution that you're providing, the service that you're providing to people. And, that can vary. If you're not feeling confident, reschedule. I mean, just flat out. But there are days of the week that you're higher, have a high likely probability of getting a yes versus a no. Friday is definitely a no day. Nobody wants to be have a sales meeting on a Friday or Friday afternoon, especially if you're doing your email marketing and want to follow up. Like, the ideal is Tuesday to Thursday. Monday, people are maybe kind of taking it in over the weekend, but Monday's a great sales day, surprisingly. So is the next one. It would be Tuesday and Wednesday. Like, Thursday, it becomes iffy, and Friday's just a no. So it's not just timing of the industry or the people that you're selling, but it's also just timing, period. Like,
well, some days, Mindy, some days it's hard. I mean, I'm going to be, everybody out there, some days you've got to go out and do that because you maybe have enough projects to sustain you, but if you're not out there trying to sell and market, and I think, but days, I think a real good thing, and I've learned this from my brother-in-law, when you have 1 or 2 closes that particular day, or you have one, continue, because he jokes about it, because people can almost smell it on you. You walk in the room, you got confidence, and everybody wants a piece of that. So I think some days, not only is that days that you say Mondays and maybe Fridays, but it's also you personally. He basically said, don't go out there and get more discouraged when you feel you have to do it. Take a couple of days off and go out there. And when you do have, even if you call a friend first, say I call you or I call Rob and say, man, I got to get out there today, but we have a gentle conversation before where we uplift each other, you're going to be more likely to go out there because, I know personally, when I sit in my office all day, I'm miserable. If I'm out there amongst the folks, I'm feeling good, So I think we have to realize that change happens with us, but you've got to, there's ways to exude confidence,
Yeah, people are human lie detector tests. If you are desperate, people can smell it on you, and it's a bad time. So you got to figure out how to not ride the roller coaster of sales. So you get a sale, you're really hyped up, and things are going good, and you have a tendency to, I'm good for the next month. I don't need to continue to sell. And then it plummets, and all of a sudden, then you get to a desperate point, and people can always sniff out the desperate salesman.
It's weird. You have to sell. I mean, there's 2 caveats, right? Like, you're not selling to yourself, so don't talk to your client like you're talking to yourself. But at the same time, sometimes you have to sell yourself. Like, that got the best solution available for X, Y, or Z. Like, I'm kicking ass. Like, all these things. Like, you got to hype yourself up. But at the same time, like, know how you come across. Like, you're not sitting across from you in that sales, meeting. So how are you coming across?
I have a whole routine that I have to go through. I will not take a sales call before 2 cups of coffee. Actually, I won't take any call before 2 cups of coffee. And if I'm going to do a lot of sales that day, I will call somebody and chat, just to have a random conversation before I start talking, because I have to warm up to it.
Yeah.
Well, I think another, what we're doing is fantastic, and everybody that does watch the entire thing, and we hope you do, is these are things that we want to be very conversational. We want to let you all know that we've been through this before, and I think, just some of the topics that Rob and Mindy have mentioned has helped me personally, and the goal is also to get you to a different level of thinking about your business. One thing I want to do, Rob, is mention that we can literally, if you would like, at some point, once we develop the catalog of everything we're doing, we could feature certain sections. We could pull out a certain section and we actually highlight that and put those into shorts if you like. So that's something we can look at for people if they just want something specifically about a deeper dive into what you're doing. We could highlight rather than going through maybe some of our our experiences and conversations, but more instructional from you. We could actually pull those pieces out for you.
Yeah, I'm gonna be good.
Cool. Well, thank you guys. Have a blessed weekend. Mindy, congratulations.
Yep, congrats.
Congrats. And you're actually leaving us on Monday?
Well, no. I mean, I'm going to be around.